Hey there! Today I want to give you an update on a case where Ontario teacher candidates had argued that they should not have to pass a mandatory math test in order to get qualified because they said the math test was racial discrimination. Now, I described this case in an earlier video. It was a case that we at the Canadian Constitution Foundation intervened in at the Court of Appeal. Well, the decision is now out. The math test is not discriminatory, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Christine, and I'm the Litigation Director for the Canadian Constitution Foundation, a legal charity that fights for fundamental freedoms in Canada. I upload regular videos about our ongoing cases and about other interesting developments in constitutional law in Canada. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please hit like and subscribe below. It really helps my videos out a lot. Also, please remember that nothing in my videos is legal advice. If you have your own legal question or problem, please consult your own lawyer. So I have done a few videos about this case, which is called Petrucci and Ontario, but I call it the math is racist case. Now I'll put a link in the description below to some of those other videos and a link to the case itself so you can read it for yourself. Now, before I get to the decision, I should tell you a little bit about the lead up to the case. So the Ontario government had created this new requirement that teacher candidates needed to pass what they called a math proficiency test. And this was created because the government and parents were pretty concerned about low and dropping math scores among Ontario students. And due to a math teacher shortage, elementary teachers can end up teaching math even if they had never intended to be a math teacher. So the government decided to create this math proficiency test to ensure that all teachers had this baseline level of math skill. And the test included questions that had actually been pulled from existing tests for students in grades 3, 6, and 9, as well as the test also included a series of questions on math pedagogy, which is how to teach math. Now, I think we all probably share a similar view that requiring teachers to answer some basic math questions, the same questions that are given to their own students, along with requiring them to answer a few additional questions about how to teach math, well, that seems probably pretty reasonable to most of us. But a group of teacher candidates challenged the test, arguing that because some early results of the test showed that teacher candidates from certain racial groups were failing the test at higher rates than white candidates, the test was a form of unjustified racial discrimination. So they brought a legal challenge on the basis of the Charter guarantee in Section 15 to be free from unjustified discrimination. And shockingly, a lower court in Ontario accepted the teacher candidate's argument. And the lower court decision, I have to say, it was based on really flimsy data. It was based on preliminary test results from July of 2021. And at that point, there were 3,600 candidates who took the test and around 2,800 who actually filled out this demographic questionnaire. And based on that questionnaire and the test results, the teacher candidates argued that there was this significant disparity in the relative success for test takers in different race categories. So, for example, the 2021 data showed that 70% of Black candidates and 71% of Indigenous candidates passed the test, compared to 92% of Asian candidates and 91% of white candidates. Now, for that July data, it means that there were 474 candidates who failed the first time they took the test. And about half of those 474 retook the test. And of those retakes, 85% passed. But among the retakes, very, very few of them gave demographic data. So the lower court was left with this very, very tiny pool of data. 259 candidates who had failed the first test and hadn't yet rewritten the test, because you had unlimited rewrites, and they hadn't rewritten by the end of July. But part of the lower court's reasoning in finding the test was discriminatory was they found that just having to retake the test at all was a burden that fell disproportionately on some racial groups. Now, it was this flimsy data that the court relied on to determine that the test was racial discrimination. And I want to emphasize a few things here. First, of course, it is good to have a diverse teaching profession. We want our students to have a variety of teachers, including teachers who reflect different races and cultures, and teachers who look like them. That is a good thing. Second, there is absolutely nothing about a person's race that makes them better or worse at math. And there should also be nothing surprising about the fact that there's variation among the pass and fail rate of a test. I mean, there's natural human variation. We shouldn't expect total uniformity in test scores. And to the extent that there is a difference in the pass rate, that is an opportunity to improve your skill. It is a test that has unlimited retakes, and it has an opportunity to improve. It creates an opportunity to improve your math skills. But I guess to those people who are educated in the politics of radicalism, variation in math proficiency somehow becomes evidence of racism in math. And I actually think that it's the racist position to say that there should be no test of math skill for teachers because some racial groups might be more likely to fail the test. Nothing about your race determines that. And we used to be able to spot this a mile away and say that that kind of argument is bigoted and racist. Some people call it the soft bigotry of low expectations, but I don't even think it's soft bigotry. It's just racist to think that your ethnic background has anything to do with your ability to do math. And there's a very famous quote from a German mathematician named David Hilbert. And Professor Hilbert is credited with saying, "Mathematics knows no race or geographic boundaries. For mathematics, the cultural world is one country." And look, most of us today look at that statement and we say, that's straightforward, pretty sensible. Math is a universal language. It is a pure science. Your race has nothing to do with it. But when Hilbert said it, it actually took a lot of courage because he was a mathematician in 1930s Germany at what until 1934 was the leading math institution in the world, a place called Göttingen University, Germany. And in the face of anti-Semitism throughout Europe, Hilbert had supported the appointment of Jews to academic positions in the university. He co-authored a book with a Jewish scholar. But in 1933, the Nazis implemented a law that ordered the dismissal of Jews from the civil service, including university professors. So Hilbert watched the Jewish professors be purged from institutions like his university. And in 1934, Hilbert went to a banquet where he was asked by the new Nazi Minister of Education, how is mathematics at the university now that it is free from the Jewish influence? And Hilbert replied, there is no mathematics in Göttingen anymore. And his position is as true today as it was in the 1930s. There's nothing about your race that makes someone better or worse at math. And that racist ideology destroyed not just Göttingen University, but all of Germany and much of Europe. And to me, this case is an echo of that racist ideology. You know, I don't want to overstate the point. Progressives today are not destroying mathematics by ordering racial minorities removed from universities, but instead they are perpetuating bigotry by emphasizing the importance of race over knowledge and skill, and through that bigotry of low expectations. And I think that the case, Petrucci, is just another example of that. But the decision of the lower court has now been overturned by the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal wrote that relying on just the first 7 weeks of data was insufficient. The data sets were just too small. And at the appeal, there was more information that was presented. Now, that's not always allowed in appeals, but in this case, they brought later data from later on in 2021 that showed of the now 8,350 candidates who took the test one or more time, 95% passed, including 93% from racialized groups. One would assume that as the test continues to be available, the pass rate would have risen with subsequent retakes. So as a result, the Court of Appeal found that based on the record before it, it could not be concluded that the math test had a disproportionate impact on the entry into the teaching profession for racialized teachers. And the court sort of scolded the teacher candidates and the lower court. They said, A sufficient evidentiary record is not a mere technicality. It is essential in all cases, and particularly in constitutional litigation, which frequently engages concepts and principles that are fundamental to the importance of Canadian society and which may profoundly affect the lives of Canadians. They found that the lower court had declared the math test to be unconstitutional without any information as to the results of tests after July of 2021. And given that preliminary and incomplete record, the Court of Appeal found that the lower court had made a mistake in finding the test violated the charter and that lower court decision would be set aside. The Court of Appeal also looked at the later data on the test and found that when looking at that later data, it was not discriminatory. The Court of Appeal also found that rewrites were not a disproportionate burden on racialized groups. They found that the only way to accurately assess the impact of the test is to ask if it bars entry to the teaching profession. And the claim that having to rewrite the test is a bar to entry or somehow disproportionate, they said it lacked any evidence and was purely speculative. A lot of us will look at this, and I do. I think it's a refreshing dose of common sense from the court, but I also am a little hesitant because in the long term, it evades some important questions. And this has been pointed out by a legal scholar, Leonid Sirota, who wrote about this case, and he said it bypassed many of the more challenging issues about substantive equality. He said that this particular test is just not hard enough to pass. It has unlimited rewrites and, relatively low technical standards. The test, he said, does not ultimately prevent any significant number of people of whatever race from becoming teachers, and that the facts could be different in another case. And what would happen in a future case where rewrites perhaps are not available? So the battle, I think, is not over. These sort of radical claims that math is racist have not subsided. For example, just in December, the Elementary Teachers Federation of Toronto ran a workshop called Decolonizing Math Education, which asked, how can we support students to understand and challenge settler colonialism in its many forms within our math classes? Math class sure has changed since I took it in high school, because I don't remember any of that being relevant to trigonometry. So just another example of this strange thinking. In 2021, the updated grade 9 Ontario math curriculum included extremely politicized statements like mathematics has been used to normalize racism and marginalization of non-Eurocentric mathematical knowledges, and a decolonial, anti-racist approach to math education makes visible its historical roots and social constructions. Then in 2022, the Ontario Mathematics Coordinators Association ran a webinar featuring what was described as the pyramid of white supremacy in math education. And according to this presentation, covert forms of white supremacy include a Eurocentric math curriculum, standardized testing, the phrases just stick to math, or math is neutral because 2 + 2 is 4, and of course, I don't see color in my math class. Now, Hilbert lived through a world where institutions cared more about race-obsessed political ideology than about learning and truth and knowledge. Yet in the face of this shift in progressive ideology, I think Hilbert's brave statement at the time about math knowing no race, it seems sadly quaint. Math does transcend linguistic and cultural barriers, and I think focusing on race rather than skill ultimately will undermine and destroy the study of math, just as Hilbert witnessed 90 years ago. Now, I hope you enjoyed this update. If you want to learn more about this case and others like it, you can subscribe to the channel, and you can also sign up for our email alerts at theccf.ca/freedom updates so you get notified as soon as a decision comes out in a case like this. Now, this decision came out in November. I'm only just getting to the update today. Anyway, thanks for watching, and let's keep fighting for freedom in Canada.